And of course, if I ask a question that doesn't make sense, which happens a lot, just go. Go ahead and tell me to repeat that as well. Ms. McCoy, can you?
I think I'm going to make it easier on you. I'm going to switch the video for her, so she just look right at that video there.
Okay, great.
All right, you have to proceed.
Can you please state your full name?
Kellen Marie Hynum.
And what was your maiden name?
McCoy.
Okay. So currently, are you working?
No.
You're home with a fairly young child, correct?
A couple, yes.
Okay. Back in 2018-19, were you working as a teacher?
Yes.
Okay. How long were you teaching?
At that point in time, maybe four or so years.
And what city did you live in at that time?
Tucson, Arizona.
What school did you teach at?
Immaculate Heart Academy.
Was Immaculate Heart is that a private school, public school?
Private.
Okay. And what grades did you teach back then?
I taught second grade, third grade, and fourth grade consecutively.
And do you recall in 2018-19 school year, what grade were you teaching?
I'm not certain. It was either third or fourth grade.
All right. So do you know the name Nola Ferreter?
Yes.
Okay. And how do you know her?
She was a student of mine.
And do you remember when that was?
2019.
In 2019?
I believe 2019.
Okay. Was there ever some moment where Nola's brother comes into your classroom and asks you to make an announcement? Do you recall that?
Yes.
Do you recall when that was, approximately?
Can you repeat that question?
Sure. Do you recall when, approximately, what month and year that happened?
Off the top of my head, I can't remember for sure. Maybe February of 2019 or March.
All right. And would it help to refresh your recollection if you had something to look at from that time?
Yes.
So earlier today, my office should have emailed you a document. If you take a look at that and tell me if that refreshes your recollection as to the time frame we're talking about.
Yes. 1 second.
I'm sorry?
March of 2019.
All right, so March of 2019. All right. And tell me what you recall happening between Ronan and Nola in your class.
Ronan came into my classroom and asked if he could make an announcement to my class, which at that point in time, it was a regular thing for teachers to send students to other classrooms to make announcements. So I said, yes, you can make an announcement to the class. So he walked to the front of the class and started to say things where I quickly realized he was not sent by another teacher. He said some things to Nola to humiliate her in front of the whole class. He made her cry and once I caught on to this wasn't to the fact that he was not making an announcement sent by another teacher, I stopped him and I asked him to go back to his own classroom.
And did he leave?
Yes, he did.
Did you notice any response from Nola?
Yes, she was very, very upset. She was crying, and it took a while for her to gain her composure.
What was your impression of that whole incident? I'm sure.
Sustained.
Had you
My impression.
had you I'll ask another question. Had you ever had something like that happen in your class before?
Sustained.
Based on what happened, did you do anything next? Did you reach out to the parents?
Yes, I did.
And
I sent them an email.
generally stating what had happened, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And what, if anything, was their response to you notifying them of this action?
They came in immediately, I believe later that day, to talk about it. They had requested that they meet separately. So first I met with mom and talked to mom about what had happened. And then after that, I met with dad separately to talk about it. And while I was talking to each parent, the kids were waiting by themselves, either in the hallway or in their car. I believe Nola may have been in the car while mom was having a meeting with me, or in the hallway. And Ronan was in the hallway while I met with dad.
So let me talk to you about the dad response, Tim Fairder's response. When he met with you, when you conveyed, so let me ask you, what is it generally he wanted to know about?
Both.
Trying to avoid the hearsay, just generally.
I'm going to overrule the question as phrased, but ma'am, you're not to say what Mr. Farrader said. You're only supposed to state what your understanding was that he wanted to know. You can answer subject to that limitation.
So what did he want to know?
Can I continue?
Yes.
Yes, you can state what was your understanding of what he wanted to know.
My understanding is that he wanted to know the facts of what happened. He seemed concerned and wanted to just understand what the situation was. And he was very,
go ahead.
He seemed very receptive and understanding of what had happened.
Did he, in your presence, ask you any follow-up questions regarding trying to determine if there was any punishment from the school, detention, or if the school was taking any action against Ronan?
Not that I can recall.
And did he give you some indication that they would handle it as a family at home?
That was my impression, although he didn't. I don't remember him stating anything directly saying what they were or weren't going to do at home.
Was there any impression you got from that interaction as to what, if anything, he was going to do next?
Objection is a speculation.
Sustained.
No.
Based on that interaction, so you had a separate interaction.
Mr. Wade, let me just make sure the witness knows. When I sustain an objection, ma'am, that means you're not to answer it, okay? Do you understand that? And I sustain the objection to the last question, so the answer is stricken. Jury is instructed to disregard it. You may continue now, Mr. Wahid.
Sure. You had a similar conversation with the mother, correct?
Yes.
Did the mother also inquire of you as to essentially facts of what happened.
Yes.
Based on that interaction, did the mother give you any impression as to, or ask you if there were any consequences at the school that were going to take place?
Not that I can recall.
And Nola continued to be a student in your class, correct?
Yes.
One moment.
Granted.
No other questions for this witness. Thank you.
All right, any cross by the state? All right, Ms. Coakley, you may proceed.
So you were Nola's fourth grade teacher, right?
I believe so, yes.
And Ronan, at the time that this happened, was also in elementary school, correct?
Yes.
So, like, he was one grade above Nola, so he was a fifth grader at the time that this happened?
Yes, I believe he was in fifth grade.
So he was approximately 11 years old when this happened, correct?
That sounds right, yes.
And the date that it happened is March 22nd, 2019, right?
Yes.
And you sent an email to the parents, correct?
Can you repeat that?
You sent an email to the parents to notify them of the incident involving their children, correct?
Yes.
And you told the parents that what occurred is that Ronan came into your classroom and asked to make an announcement.
Let me stop you if there. Ma'am, it looks like you're typing on a keyboard and you cannot be reading anything or typing anything while you're testifying. So just please acknowledge to me that you're not reading. Yes, it looks to me like your hands were moving. All right, I just want to make sure, anytime I'm doing, anytime I'm doing remote testimony, I just need to make sure the witnesses understand the restrictions that you cannot be reading anything or typing anything or communicating with anyone else. You understand that?
I understand that. I'm just watching my kids.
Okay, perfectly understood. But anytime the eyes start darting away, I have to be careful that you're not getting improper influences. So you may proceed. I just want to make sure you understand the instructions.
And what Ronan said in front of the class was, I've gotten several reports from Dylan and Blake about stealing in this class. Nola, stop. Just because I'm your brother doesn't mean you can do that. And then he asked Nola to stand up, correct?
Yes.
And that made Nola cry, correct?
Yes.
That's all that he said, correct? Before you stopped him.
No, that's not all that he said. Those are just the specific words that I remembered as I was typing that email.
Okay, that's all the information that you provided to the parents, right? That he came into class and he accused his little sister of stealing, correct?
That is all the information I provided in the email. Yes.
Now, you did speak with the parents, correct?
Yes.
You were not aware at the time how Ronan was being treated by his parents at home, correct?
Correct.
You also are not aware of how the parents chose to punish their 11-year-old son for this infraction, or are you?
Correct. I was not aware.
They didn't tell you what they were going to do with this information, correct?
They did not tell me.
That's all the questions I have.
All right, any redirect, Mr. Waheed? All right, you may proceed.
Ma'am, the state referred to this as an infraction. At the time when it happened, in your mind, was this an infraction or a prank or something like that?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance?
Overruled. You can answer.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. The state, just when they asked you, referred to this incident as an infraction by Ronan, and I'm asking you, at the time when you were there, was it your perception this was an infraction or a prank or something minimal like that?
What's the definition of an infraction?
Sure. So did you think this was just a prank between siblings? Did it come across to you as that, as something in play?
No, it didn't seem like a simple sibling prank to me.
And why?
Sustained.
No other questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Waheed. All right, ma'am, that concludes your testimony. That means that you may sign off and your testimony is concluded. She's excused from further proceedings, correct?
Yes.
All right, you may sign off, counsel. Or, ma'am, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Waheed, your next witness.
I'd like to call Steve Johnson. Steve's phone is sideways, apparently.
All right, Mr. Johnson, can you hear me? Let me put him back in the waiting room.
I see him in the corner there, Judge.
All right, Mr. Johnson, this is Judge Coates in Palm Beach County, Florida. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can.
Okay, all right, you've been called as a witness in the matter of State versus Farrader. First order of business is for me to go ahead and administer the oath. If you could raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, all right, Mr. Waheed, you may begin.
Thank you, Judge. Sir, can you state your name and what city you currently reside in?
Sure. My name is Stephen Johnson. I live in Tucson, Arizona.
And how long have you lived there?
My entire life, 40 years.
Are you currently employed?
I am.
Generally, what type of work do you do?
Director of Business Development for a pain clinic.
Do you have any children?
I do.
How many children do you have, sir?
9.
9 children. You're busy.
Correct. Yeah, apparently.
Do you know someone named Tim Farrader?
I do.
And how do you know him?
I met Tim back in 2017 at a basketball camp for our daughters when he first moved here.
Here being Tucson, Arizona, correct?
Correct, here being Tucson, Arizona. And then subsequently learned that his children were going to attend the same school as mine, Immaculate Heart in Tucson.
And what would you say was the frequency of contact between you and Tim Farrader back in those years?
At first, not much, but he and I coached basketball together for 2 seasons. We coached our daughters. And so that would have mean I would see him probably 3 or 4 times a week.
And do you recall his son, Ronan?
I do.
And do you recall when you, approximately when or how you first met Ronan?
I met Ronan at one of the practices. His dad introduced him, and he sat and watched the practice. And then he was also in my son's class at school.
So your son and his school went to school in the same class?
That is correct.
At any point, did you go to Tim's home?
I did.
And can you tell me what those occasions were about? Why'd you go?
Initially, they were social. There were for some kids' birthdays and the baptism of their youngest, Pierce. And there were a few times that I was over there for business. Tim was a publisher of a magazine, and I was learning how that worked from him at his home during the day.
And so did you at any point see the inside of Tim's house?
Yes,
Did you ever, were you ever shown Ronan's room?
I was. That is correct.
Who showed you that room?
I believe Tim would have given me a tour my first time there.
Did you, at any point at that time, do you recall interacting with Ronan yourself directly?
Yes, I did interact with Ronan several times. He was always out with the family and the guests when we were over there.
Okay. In your interactions with Tim during that time, did he seem guarded or any way secretive about his family?
No.
And did you ever have occasion to see or interact with Ronan enough to get a gauge on his behavior?
I did. Ronan was always pleasant. He'd always have kind of a sly smile on his face. He was talkative. So we connected pretty easily.
And did you and Tim and your son and Ronan ever collectively engage in anything?
Perhaps within those social settings, we never had anything particular for the four of us.
And I know you guys were teaching, were coaching girls basketball.
Yep.
And do you know if either did you ever see or know that Ronan was engaged in any extracurricular activities back then?
No, I know that he didn't play any sports.
Right.
That I do know.
Did you on any occasion see the interaction between Tim and Ronan?
Yes.
How would you describe that interaction?
Oftentimes, because Ronan would sit and watch the practices, there would be some times when Tim would go over to help him with homework or something that he needed, common if a kid is near a parent. There were times when we would be at a game and I'd show up and I'd notice that Ronan had a notebook out and he would be writing, "I will not hit my sister," like 50 times or whatever the number was. And the reason that's...
Mr. Johnson, there's been an objection. You cannot say what someone said or what they wrote. That's hearsay. That part of the answer is stricken. The jury is instructed to disregard it. All right, you may continue with your next question, Mr. Waheed.
Without saying what he was writing, you saw him writing things at the practice, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And did you have any understanding of why he was doing those writings?
I did.
And what was your understanding?
I'm going to sustain it, but approach, because you may have an exception you're going to rely on. All right, so the objection is sustained. Next question, Mr. Wahid.
Sir, did you observe Tim be affectionate to Ronan?
Objection relevant.
Sustained.
Did you ever observe Tim disciplining Roland?
Yes.
Did you observe an interaction between them where Tim was not disciplining Ronan?
Yes.
Would it be fair to say that they, in your mind, that strike that? Did Ronan show affection for Tim?
Objection relevant.
Yes.
I overruled. I'll allow that question.
Yes.
Did you ever observe Tim disciplining the other children in his family?
Yes. Yes.
And just so we're clear, you knew Tim and you were interacting with Tim during 2017, correct?
Correct. Yes.
2018
Yes.
and into 2019?
Yes.
Until his child Ronan left Immaculate Heart and went to another school?
Until they left for Florida, I believe.
Okay, so even when Ronan switched schools, you were still interacting with Tim and his family, correct?
Correct.
No other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Wahid. Any cross? All right, Ms. Black, you may proceed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Johnson. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Good afternoon.
So you stated that you kind of became friends with Mr. Ferreter back in 2017?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, and you both coached your daughters in basketball?
Yes.
Okay, you stated on direct that you had seen Ronan's room, right?
Yes.
And that was inside of the house?
Correct.
And that was before Pierce had been born, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so you don't know where he was living after Pierce was born?
That is correct.
You also stated that you did not see a structure in the garage, right?
That is right.
And you didn't really have any contact with Mr. Ferreter when he had decided to move to Florida?
Aside from a few text messages wishing things like Happy Thanksgiving, no.
Okay, so you never went to his house in Jupiter back in December of 2021?
That is correct.
You never saw where Ronan was living at that time, right?
That is correct.
You never saw the structure where Ronan was living in, right?
I'm sorry, one more time?
You never saw the structure that Ronan had been living in 2021?
I did not.
And you weren't made aware of how the defendant had been disciplining him at that time, right?
I had not been made aware of any specifics.
1 minute, Your Honor.
Granted.
I have no further questions.
All right, any redirect, Mr. Wahid? All right, thank you, Mr. Wahid. Mr. Johnson, that concludes your testimony. Is this witness now excused? Yes. Okay, all right, sir, your testimony is concluded, so you can go ahead and sign off Zoom. Thank you for being here. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Murad, Mr. Wahid, call your next witness. And Mark, when you come in, you can go ahead and change the input on the screen so the jury's not burdened with the Zoom link.
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
All right, Mr. Waheed, you may begin at your convenience.
Sir, can you state your name and spell your last name for us?
Sev Debizadi, D-E, B for Bob, O-R-Z-A-T-T-I.
And where do you live?
I live in Melbourne, Australia.
And how do you know Tim Ferreter?
Yes, I do.
And how do you know him?
I met Tim when we were at seniors in high school in 1992. I was an exchange student. I met Tim then, and we've been friends ever since.
Where was that?
That was in Milford, Michigan.
Okay. And over the years, you and Tim have interacted continuously, correct?
Correct. We've probably seen each other on 9 or 10 occasions in person, and we've stayed in contact via phone and FaceTiming with our kids and so on and so forth.
And your children know his family, correct?
Correct.
And you actually visited his house in 2013, correct?
Correct.
And then again in 2019, correct?
Correct.
All right. So I'm going to take you to 2019. So in 2019, tell me if you remember approximately when in the year did you visit his house?
It would have been July.
Right.
Sir, move up to the mic just a little bit closer and speak a little bit louder. I want to make sure you're getting accurately recorded.
Sorry, July.
All right. And where was that home?
That was in Sedona.
The home was in Sedona?
Yes.
Was the home possibly in Tucson?
Tim's home was in Tucson, but when I first got there, we went to Sedona.
Understood.
Yep.
Okay, so let's start with Sedona. So you were with your family?
Correct.
And how many children do you have?
3 children.
Okay. When you went to Sedona, were you with Tim's family?
I went with Tim. Tim met us in Phoenix. We drove up to Sedona to meet Tracy, Nola, Ronan, and Fiona, and Pierce.
And what type of structure did you all stay in?
It was a 2-story home. Tim and his family stayed on the top level, and my wife and my kids stayed on the bottom level.
And do you know where did Ronan sleep during that time?
Ronan slept in the master room with Tim and Tracy.
And how long was that time that you guys were in that house in Sedona?
Approximately 5 days.
All right. It was just a vacation in Sedona?
Correct. We went there. Fiona had a softball tournament. So obviously Tim and Tracy took her around to all the softball tournaments that she could play, and it was a big one, and they invited us to come down and spend some time and do that. So we went down there for the softball tournament. Yep.
All right. Subsequent to Sedona, where did you all go?
We hired an Airbnb in Tucson, 2 or 3 minutes from where Tim and Tracy live.
Did you, on that trip, have occasion to go to Tim's house?
Yes, I did.
And when you went to Tim's house, did you look around the house?
Yes, I did. Tim showed me around.
And did you interact with Ronan on that day?
Yes, I did.
And what, if anything, did Ronan do?
Just normal kid. He spoke to me and showed me around, showed me his room, as all the kids did, and was happy to show me and was excited and showed me his toys and books and so on and so forth.
And where was his room?
His room was in the garage.
All right. And did you have any occasion to see Ronan interacting with your children?
Yes, I did.
And one of your children is a special needs child, correct?
Correct.
And what's that issue, if you can tell us?
My younger son has autism.
All right. So in the interaction that you observed between Ronan and your children, did anything occur that concerned you?
There was an incident in the pool where, Ronan would be overly aggressive, duck the children underwater and hold them down there for a little bit and so on and so forth. So yeah, but I mean, I was there, so I was there to protect and look after them, but I wouldn't have left my children alone if it was just Ronan and the kids.
So don't kids play like that, putting their heads underwater, that sort of thing?
I think when both of them choose to do it together and they play, this was more just one pushing the other down against their will.
And with your special needs child, did that give you any extra cause to pause?
Just maybe keep an extra eye out, just to make sure everything was okay, and I kept an eye on where he was and where the rest were.
Were there decisions made about going out for dinner or things like that with the Ferders that factored in Ronan in any way?
We always went out together, so we never left any of the kids behind. We're always as a group, as a family. We went out together, we ate together, we swam together, we played together, we did everything together as families.
All right. One moment. Going back to Sedona for a moment, was there ever an incident there that happened with Ronan that caused you concern?
When we were leaving and we were packing up and I guess checking the house before we left, we noticed there were knives missing from the kitchen. So we started to look for those to make sure we put those back and find out where they were. We couldn't find them, and then Tracy went into Ronan's bag to have a look and found the knives and brought them back. And we put those away. So there was probably a handful of knives that were missing and found in Ronan's bag.
No other questions.
Any Cross? All right, Ms. Black, you may proceed.
I just want to get your last name right. It's Mr. Debrazati?
Debrazati, yep.
Debrazati, okay. So when did you first meet Mr. Ferreter?
1992.
And you've been friends ever since?
Correct.
You stated that you visited his house back in 2019?
Yes.
And this was after the vacation you guys had taken to Sedona?
It was right after.
Okay. So you stated that you saw Ronan's room, right?
Correct.
And did you stated that it was in the garage?
Yes.
Okay. Did you see if there was a bucket in there?
No, I did not.
Okay. Did you see whether or not the door locked from the outside or the inside?
The door was open, so I was unaware of any lock.
Okay. Did you see if there was a light switch inside the room?
I didn't look.
Was there a bathroom inside of that structure?
There wasn't a bathroom in the structure, no.
Now, you stated about an incident with the kids in the pool?
Yes.
Okay. And isn't it a fair assessment that they were just horse playing in the pool?
Yeah, like I said before, I would normally say that if there was two interacting together and playing, but this was more one imposing his will on the others. The girls didn't really want to play. They didn't want to be ducked or really horse played, but he continued to do it. So.
How old was Ronan at that time?
I think he was 11.
So he's basically being like the annoying older brother at that point.
Yeah, annoying and yeah.
But you were there to protect them if they needed to be protected.
Absolutely, I wouldn't have left.
You also talked about an incident with some knives.
Correct.
Okay, and the fact that Tracy had taken them from Ronan.
From his bag.
He didn't threaten you with those knives?
No,
He didn't threaten the kids with those knives?
not that I'm aware of.
He didn't threaten Tracy with those knives?
Not that I'm aware of.
It's just that he had the knives and she took them out of the bag.
Correct. Yeah. So I don't even know if he knew how long he had them for.
Now, did you ever visit the Ferders' house in Jupiter in 2021?
No.
Okay, so you don't know what the living arrangement was at that time?
No.
You don't know if there was a similar room that there was in Arizona in Jupiter?
No.
Woman, Your Honor?
Granted. Any redirect, Mr. Waheed? All right, looks like you do, so you may proceed.
Sir, would you have left your kids with Ronan unsupervised?
Objection, relevance.
Absolutely not.
Overruled.
I'm sorry, sir?
Absolutely not.
And why not?
I would think it would be unsafe.
Thank you.
All right, is this witness testimony concluded at this point? Excused. All right, sir, that concludes your testimony. You may step down. Thank you for being here. Call your next witness, Ms. Murad or Mr. Waheed. Are you doing the direct, Ms. Murad? Yes, sir.
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. All right, Ms. Murad, you may begin.
Thank you, Your Honor. No worries. Sir, could you state your name for us, please?
Yes, is the microphone all right?
Yes,
It is.
Stuart Graham, like the cracker, Graham.
Dr. Graham, could you take us through your educational experience?
I can. I have a baccalaureate degree from the University of Texas at Austin in microbiology. I have a medical degree from the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, Texas. I completed 2 years following medical school, postgraduate training in anatomic pathology at Case Western Reserve in Cleveland, Ohio. I am a pathologist by training. The one part of after medical school of training in pathology is called anatomic pathology. That's the specialty of pathology that most people think of as being real pathology, where you perform autopsies, you receive specimens, you look at those specimens under a microscope, and you then reach conclusions regarding disease. Following completion of 2 years in Cleveland, Ohio, in anatomic pathology, I then completed 2 additional years of training in clinical pathology at the University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston, Texas. Clinical pathology is another branch of pathology which deals with the study of disease in human beings. It differs, though, in anatomic pathology, in that rather than looking at portions of of the body, either with the naked eye or under a microscope. The disease processes rather are studied by the use of laboratory tests. And the part in clinical pathology deals with the implementation of laboratory tests and the interpretation of laboratory tests. Following those 2 years, so now we're 4 years following medical school, I completed a 5th year of training after some time in the subspecialty of forensic pathology. I completed that training at the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in the city of New York. Forensic pathology, as you may know, is the area of pathology which deals primarily with the interaction of disease and injury in the human body. And as such, forensic pathologists are often asked to make determinations with regard to what natural disease did a person have, what injuries did they have, and what was the result of those natural diseases and or injuries. I would say that the injuries can be of a variety of sorts. They can be, of course, violent, either with a hammer, with a knife, or with a gun. But injuries can also be those of withholding things, such as food. It's possible to starve a person to death. Following completion of that fellowship, I then, after that, sat for the American Board of Pathology certifications and passed those my first time in anatomic pathology, clinical pathology, cytopathology, and forensic pathology. After completion of and receipt of my certifications, I've been active for the past, gosh, I am old, 30 years in both the 30 years in the performance of surgical pathology, which involves the study of specimens from live patients, and for 13 years in forensic pathology, which, as I said, is a little bit different of a specialty, which involves the inclusion of injuries as well. At this time, I most recently now work as a forensic pathologist in a variety of capacities. I do per diem work. Most recently, last year, I was at the university. At the last year, I was in Webb County, Texas, on the Rio Grande, working as a medical examiner for 3 months, which, as you can guess, was quite busy. I also perform private postmortem exams on behalf of families and hospitals. And finally, I do consultations both in civil court and in criminal court, as we are here today.
And in this case, were you hired by my firm to review some records and come to an opinion regarding a particular issue?
I was.
Okay. Could you take this jury through the records that you reviewed?
I will. The records I reviewed were the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office of offense report, the Children Protection Services report. There were some photographs associated with the Children's Protective Services report. There were health records from JFK North. There were also pediatric records from Infants and Children's, which is a large group of pediatricians which took care of Ronan. And I believe that's about it.
So I want to talk specifically about the infants and children's records. What years do those span?
Well, the records span, the records span from the time that Ronan is 8 8 years, 8 months, up until the time that Ronan is 13 years, 3 months, or thereabout. In other words, approximately from June 1 of 2016 until December 21st of 2021.
Based on those records, what is your opinion regarding Ronan's nourishment, health, and weight?
Based upon those records, it's important to note that the records include within them a calculation which is endorsed by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC. And because that the assessment of nourishment is a national of national importance in pediatrics, there's a standardized way of doing it. And for each child, for their particular sex and their particular age, a calculation is performed that's called a body mass index. Well, we can call it BMI for short. But the importance of the BMI is that it takes the person's height into account and their weight to give a calculation so that for a person's sex and age, you can compare an apple with an apple. And so that you're not comparing a child's weight without relationship to their height, which obviously would cause obvious problems. The BMI then, which is endorsed by the CDC, those records were included in the ones that I reviewed, and there's a chart, and the chart shows that in 2016, when he was 8 years, 8 months old, his BMI was had a numerical value of 40. Later, in December of 2021, his BMI had risen to a value of 56. Now, it's perfectly fair for you to ask me, well, what does 40 mean and what does 56 mean? It's actually quite simple. For a BMI of 40, it would mean that at least for boys of his age, which would be 8 years, 8 months, at least 39% of the boys would weigh less. For a BMI of 56, it would mean for his age at that time, which was in December of 2021, that at least 55% of the boys would have a BMI of less than 56. That clearly, by the definition of the Center for Disease Control, means that Ronan's BMI was completely normal, in fact, right smack in the middle.
What does that tell you about, I mean, is there any evidence of malnourishment in the record?
No, there is not. By the records that I reviewed, Ronan's most recent BMI of 56, he has a weight at that time of about 113 pounds, 4 ounces. In order to be judged to be not of a healthy weight, he would have to lose over 18% of his weight. So he's well outside the guidelines for being underweight.
Okay, and is it fair to say that there's no evidence in the record that he wasn't being fed?
Sustain, rephrase with a more specific period.
In the records that you viewed from 2016 to 2019, you said there's no evidence of malnourishment, correct?
Yes, I said there is no evidence of malnourishment as judged by the BMI charts. For the question that you just alluded to, when people are deprived of food, they lose weight, and that mathematically causes their BMI to decrease so that then it is no longer within normal range.
And based on the records that you reviewed, which again are from 2016 to 2019, is Ronan regularly being taken to the pediatrician?
Yes, although the records actually, I think, extend to 2021.
Thank you. No further questions.
All right, any cross? All right, is this witness excused, Ms. Moret? Yes. All right, sir, that concludes your testimony. Thank you. You may step down and have a good weekend.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Your Honor, that concludes our witnesses for today.
Okay.
The defense has additional witnesses. The court knows the drill.
Okay. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, that means that we're going to conclude the proceedings for today. As I've already given you the heads up, we'll start back on Tuesday. We're going to start at 9 o'clock sharp on Tuesday, so check in with the jury office no later than 8:30 and be up here at the elevators meeting mark at 8:45 for 9 o'clock sharp start time. And the schedule next week will be likely as follows. Tuesday will go from 9 to 5. Wednesday likely from 12 to 5. And then Thursday, if that's necessary, it would be another 9 to 5 days. So that's kind of the schedule that I'm anticipating. There's still a little bit of movement potentially in the Wednesday schedule as I get more visibility when I get into next week. But that's the current, and I know you're probably not totally confident of my estimates anymore, but that's my estimate for next week. All right, so Monday's a court holiday, so you won't be back on Monday, obviously. It's going to be 3 days. So during the 3 days, rest, relax, and sun. Hopefully the weather is good this weekend, but make sure that you do everything possible to avoid any inadvertent media exposure during the what's going to be the long weekend, holiday weekend for us. So with that, I wish you the best, and I'll see you back on Tuesday morning, same courtroom.